Holy shit, that was C0R1. YouTube frogs, welcome to my complete guide for Clorinde, the newest 5-star electro character in Genshin Impact. Clorinde is a duelist to the T. She is a super flashy on-field DPS and able to deal high amounts of damage with both her guns and her sword by balancing her bond of life. In this video, I'll be teaching you guys all about her, going through her talent set and how to play with her, constellations and effects on her gameplay, best choices for weapons and artifact setups, recommended stats to aim for, and the best team synergies she contributes to. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I make a bunch of Genshin Impact content, both educational and just for fun. Without further ado, let's begin. Talents. So Clorinde's actually got an incredibly unique kit that uses Bond of Life to deal damage. Her core gameplay revolves around her skill activation, but if you look at it, the description is insanely long, like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, so I'm going to summarize the important parts instead. First, press E to activate the night visual state. In this state, her normal attacks become electro-infused pistol shots, and her E changes to an electro-infused sword lunge. Both her normal attacks and her new E in this state can be spammed with no cooldown. For her pistol shot, she gains Bond of Life if it's under 100%, which deals more damage, and those shots pierce multiple enemies. For her sword lunge, she consumes that Bond of Life, which heals her and deals increased damage. Each pistol shot grants 35% Bond of Life, and using her sword lunge when she's above 100% Bond of Life will not only clear it, but also heal her for at least 10% of her max HP. This is due to how Bond of Life works, and in Clorinde's case, her kit is built in to have this self-sustain. While she's in this state, any external healing from team members will be converted directly to Bond of Life. For example, something that would have healed her for 20% of her HP is instead converted to 20% Bond of Life. Healing in this way is only marginally beneficial since 3 pistol shots already pushes her above 100%. So unless you gain at least 30 to 35% healing within her 2 shots, it doesn't really change her kit combos. When her E is on cooldown, however, she can be healed normally. So as a player, all you need to care about is this. 3 normal pistol attacks is 105% Bond of Life. When you use her E in this state, it's a sword lunge that consumes all of that Bond of Life, deals extra damage, and then heals her for about 10% max HP. After using that E, she's then back to 0% Bond of Life, and so you can proc 3 normal attacks or pistol shots again. This 3N plus E combo is essentially what you'll repeat during her night vigil state. It balances her Bond of Life, provides her self-sustained healing, and deals a lot of electro damage in either a single target or AoE setting. For the multiplier details, there's a crap ton of numbers, but you only need to care about specific ones. For pistol damage, look at Swift Hunt. So the highest multiplier is active when she's gaining Bond of Life. For sword damage, look at Impale the Knight. Also, the highest multiplier will be active when she's above 100% Bond of Life, which is the ×3 one. For healing, look at the 110% Bond of Life, which is the only important multiplier. The other 2 are when her sword lunge is used when she's below 100% Bond of Life, which is pretty suboptimal. That being said though, if you do it by accident, it will still fully clear her Bond of Life and heal her, but the healing multiplier is only 104%, which translates to like 2 to 4% max HP. Still better than nothing. Bond of Life conversion is 80% here, but her A4 passive makes it 100%, so don't really worry about this. Surging Blade is her arc alignment, which is Usia, and then the duration is 7.5 seconds, which gives roughly enough time to do about 5 to 6 full 3 pistol sword combos, and then the cooldown is 16 seconds. Her electro damage in this state follows normal internal cooldown rules. So with how fast she attacks and her sword lunge being 3 hit, she's applying electro a lot. This makes her great for aggravate situations since she can abuse the bonus reaction damage quite often. And lastly, she generates about 1 electro particle every 2 seconds, so you'll get about 4 during the whole thing. For her burst, Clorinde releases an incredible animation, Holy Moly, and launches a multi-hit nuke dealing 5 instances of AoE electro damage. This ability also instantly grants her Bond of Life before dealing damage, which is over 100% if above talent level 7. This allows her to lead her E state with an immediate maxed sword lunge before doing her normal 3 pistol combo. Those 5 instances of burst damage follow normal ICD as well for 2 extra reactions of damage, especially if enhanced by aggravate. burst. Her burst being on a 15-second cooldown matches very closely with her E cooldown, so expect a 1 burst per rotation if the 60 energy cost is met. Otherwise, 1 burst every other rotation is completely fine. Her normal attacks don't really do much. The multipliers don't matter as well because her E gives her completely new ones, so we're just going to ignore these entirely. Passive talents. So A1 passive is actually insanely important because the buff that it gives is a multiplier buff, not attack percent or damage bonus. Capped at 3 stacks, this gives 60% multiplier to her E and Q, which actually adds a significant boost in damage. For example, her E at level 8, pistol damage is 66% at low bond of life. A1 passive max stack boosts this to 126%. That's about 2 times the damage, which is pretty big, no question about it. This 60% multiplier affects her pistol damage, sword damage, which is Impale the Knight, and burst damage. For sword damage, if we look at Impale the Knight, it affects each individual hit of the ×3 multiplier. So at level 8, 43% becomes 103% by 3, which is almost triple damage. For burst at level 7, it's 190% by 5, which becomes 250% by 5. Not as much of a boost, but it's still pretty nice. Overall, A1 passive is very important, almost like half of her kit. But don't worry, it's also very easy to activate. Any electro reaction will activate it, and it doesn't have to be unique reactions. So literally any team that's not for electro will be completely fine and autopilot the electro reactions to buff your Clorinde. It'll also be activated extremely quickly because your team setup contributes, and her fast and high hit count means quick electro application. Now the cap of 1800 just means that she'll only get this boost up to a 3000 attack Clorinde, because that would be a 60% multiplier. Now for our other passive, the A4 passive, this essentially just gives her 20% bonus crit rate. Clorinde consistently reaches 100% bond of life between her sword and pistol rotation, so this is basically a given, it's for free. And the second part of her bond of life healing conversion just changes the multiplier from 80 to 100% in her E's tooltip. For talent priority, pretty straightforward. Her E is her most important ability, but her burst does need to be at level 7 or higher to instantly grant 100% bond of life, but that's really it. The normal attack is useless. So level up your E as high as possible, level up the burst to at least level 7 or as high as possible, and ignore the normal attack. Playstyle. So we went over the 3 normal attack E combo in the talent section, but here's a quick demonstration of what that looks like. You can also watch the bond of life bar constantly change, as well as the healing after her sword lunge. This is basically what you'll be doing in practical fights, dodging as necessary. You'll notice that most of the time her E will actually end sometime in the middle of her normal attack chain. This will cause your Clorinde to have some bond of life left over that her sword lunge didn't clear. This is totally normal. So the next time you activate her rotation, you'll already be starting with a little bit of bond of life, which means you might be able to proc a sword lunge slightly earlier. Overall, I found that 4 to 6 normal attack E combos are possible, but on average, you'll be comfortable to achieve 4 to 5. Achieving 6 basically requires perfect timing. Also, because sometimes you're left with bond of life remaining from the previous E, if you start your next rotation with your burst, it's possible to have her bond of life reach the near cap of 200%. In this case, you'll still be dealing the same amount of damage, but her sword lunge will be providing her increased healing up to 20% of her max HP. With regards to setup, remember that Clorinde loses her E state when she leaves the field, meaning that setup has to happen before she goes. If you aim to electro swirl with an Anemo character for some buffing, it most likely won't happen with Clorinde herself applying the electro, because she doesn't have simple electro application without sacrificing her entire ult. So she'll optimally need a second electro character for that specific setup. If you do want to min-max her specific kit, and you have all abilities available, then her full combo, including her ult, will look like so. Q into double E for an instant sword lunge, into 5 to 6 3 normal attack E combos. The Q will grant 100% plus bond of life immediately, and then activating an E and double tapping it will activate the sword lunge to clear bond of life, and then the 3 normal attack E combos for the rest of the damage. Her passive talents and overall buffs will automatically activate throughout the fight, assuming you're managing your bond of life properly. So it's pretty autopilot, honestly, and you can just focus on enjoying Clorinde's on-field time and her super flashy, sharp animations. If you want to engage in even more active combat button mashing, Thundering Fury Clorinde is an alternative playstyle that utilizes the constant reactions to reduce her E cooldown and make it near 100% uptime. Here, I'm testing Thundering Fury against the Vivian of the Lake, who is a very good HP sponge for long duration demos. Using Zhongli to protect myself while I'm focusing on her Bond of Life bar and button mashing, Thundering Fury has pretty good uptime, able to reduce the remaining cooldown after her E ends from the usual of 8 seconds to about 2 to 3 seconds. This means you can totally get near 100% uptime and possible squeeze in 2 full E activations before redoing your entire team setup. Unfortunately, Official's Oz will not be able to last that long, so this type of playstyle is a play by ear type of comp. If you're doing Quicken with Thundering Fury, I can see it being able to utilize the back-to-back E activations since Nahida's E does last for 25 seconds, meaning the 2 seconds of downtime is technically enough to refresh Oz. Regardless, both types of playstyles can work beautifully and they are both very, very fun. Constellations. So Clorinde has pretty generic constellations for a DPS character, and while they are decently strong, they aren't necessary by any stretch. None of her constellations change her playstyle or gameplay design, which is probably the most important thing to look out for in early cons. C1. Clorinde's E state gives her additional coordinated attacks every 1.2 seconds. They start with base 30% attack multiplier, but they are also buffed by her A1 passive, so they are effectively 90%. This means she gains a 180% multiplier roughly every 1.2 seconds, which is about the length of time of a 3 normal attack E combo, which at level 8 is about a 700% multiplier. So her combos gain about a 25% DPS increase with C1, and then combined with a full rotation including her burst, it's probably roughly a 20% DPS gain. C2. Her A1 passive gains a buff as well, changing the multiplier gain from 60% of her attack to 90% of her attack at max stacks. She also gains interruption resistance. So this retroactively buffs her C1 as well, and all other important damage sources of her kit, adding basically a 30% extra multiplier to everything. So rough estimation to overall DPS increase is also about 20% as well, similar to C1. C3, C5. Skill and burst plus 3 levels, which is the normal stuff. Usually this would be an 18 to 20% talent strength gain, but Clorinde's major damage output comes from her A1 passive, so it's actually halved at about 9 to 10%. Still nice. C4, free burst damage improvement. So nothing actually changes in her gameplay style, so everything's okay, since her burst already grants her an initial Bond of Life amount before actually dealing its damage. So this C4 literally just gives it a damage boost for free. You'll gain the 200% damage boost at a level 7 burst because that's when the Bond of Life exceeds 100%. C6 gains 10% crit rate, 70% crit damage, and 80% damage reduction. And then, similar to Yelan C6, also gives Clorinde 6 huge instances of extra attacks, which are affected by her A1 passive talent as well. So the 200% multiplier is effectively 290% including C2. So basically, you'll just see huge extra damage numbers during her E. Overall, Clorinde's constellations are pure strength. Extra attacks, extra scaling, and more extra attacks. Weapons. So Clorinde is a sword user, and in the sword category, there are an insane amount of DPS-oriented weapons. She's a standard electro DPS and prioritizes the common stats of attack, crit, and damage percent, with good scaling on attack percent for her A1 passive. Her E form is considered normal attack damage, so any weapons that specifically provide normal attack bonuses will scale very well with her. If you're planning on running Aggravate, Elemental Mastery also becomes another beneficial stat. Her base crit rate is pretty high, with a crit rate ascension for 19% and A4 passive granting 20% free crit rate on top of the starting 5%. Her base starts at 44%. So most likely you'll prioritize crit damage for weapon secondaries, only because this enables your artifacts to have a healthy ratio of crit rate and crit damage without overcapping. Now first, let's take a look at her signature weapon. Absolution, high base attack of 674 with the crit damage secondary at 44%, and a passive that grants 20% raw crit damage and up to 48% damage bonus for Bond of Life type characters. For Clorinde, this is the easiest passive for her to activate, since just 3 pistol shots in her E form is instant 48% damage boost. Very juicy for her, and overall the most powerful weapon for her to use. But we have so many 4 and 5-star weapons with some form of crit damage, damage bonus, attack percent, and other beneficial stats that most of you will be able to find something very similar. For our 5 stars, we've got the following. For crit damage, we have Mist Splitter, Uraku Misugiri, Lo-Fi, and Splendor. These are Ayaka's, Chiori's, Alhaitham's, and Furina's signature weapons. Out of these four, Mist-Splitter is the strongest, then Uraku, then Lo-Fi with Elemental Mastery priority, and then Splendor. Mist-Splitter has the most synergy with Elemental damage bonus. Uraku has healthy crit damage and a normal attack damage bonus. Lo-Fi works with Elemental Mastery oriented builds, and Splendor is just a raw crit damage stat stick. For crit rate 5 stars, Haran and Jade Cutter are both available, though Jade Cutter with 44% crit rate secondary is a bit tough to build around because you're almost guaranteed to be above 100% total crit. Haran squeezes by a much better margin at 33%, and its passive is one of the strongest for Clorinde. For 4 stars, while there are a bunch of options, I'm only going to list those I'd honestly recommend for you guys. Black Sword, R1 to R5, is a massive candidate to build around, with huge normal attack damage bonus and crit rate secondary. Finale of the Deep R5 is the craftable Inuzuman sword, which has incredible value because the scaling from Bond of Life on this weapon takes into account the character's total Bond of Life, not just the one that the weapon grants. So the stat stick on this provides a huge amount of attack. Lion's Roar R5. So Clorinde gains pretty solid value from this passive, since most of her team comps will have decent Electro Aura for uptime. Finally, Tokubo Shigure at R5 has an interesting combo of Elemental Mastery and damage bonus, which actually works quite well for Clorinde in aggravate-oriented teams. Of all of these weapons, I do recommend the following order. Signature weapon, then Haran, but be careful with the crit rate, then any crit damage 5-star in the list order that I mentioned, which is equivalent to roughly R5 Black Sword, and then Finale of the Deep R5, and then anything else. Artifacts. So Clorinde is a Bond of Life character, meaning Harmonic Whimsy is a de facto best in slot choice due to its sheer strength for anything related to Bond of Life. Regardless of any sort of team comp you decide to choose, Whimsy will always be a top choice. If you're running a high electro reaction comp, most easily done in quicken oriented teams, 4-piece Thundering Fury is also incredibly powerful, because not only does it provide the cooldown decrease for her elemental skill, but also gives her increased damage bonus for aggravate damage. Between TF and Bond of Life, it's really whatever you currently have, and for resin efficiency, if you already have a solid 4-piece set, it's not worth farming the other one. Now we gotta talk about Marechaussee 4-piece. So she is a Marechaussee hunter, but the 4-piece set for her puts her a little risky on the crit rate side. Plus 36% from the set on top of her base of 44 means that she's 80% without a weapon. With just 3% crit rate from 5 artifacts, she's already 95%. So in my opinion, Marechaussee Hunter is a little too close for comfort, and I'd just be careful using this 4-piece if you want an endgame build for her. It's totally possible, but risky to work around that level of crit rate. Otherwise, other 4-piece set choices include Gladiator 4-piece, pretty good. Shimenawa is okay if you don't care about her burst uptime that much. Echoes if you're under 70 ping. Thunder Soother is possible, but the uptime is like Lion's Roar. It's good, but like not all the time. Elemental Mastery choices like Gilded Dreams, it's okay for quicken comps. And then as a last resort, 2-piece if you have nothing else. Most likely, what you guys will be running are Whimsy, Thundering Fury for best in slot, Marechaussee because it's the most popular Fontaine set and you probably have pieces lying around, Gladiator for the same reason because everyone farms the bosses, and Shimenawa maybe because Emblem Domain was your most popular set from Inazuma. Others are super niche, probably won't see you guys using it, but they are possible. Main stats. Clorinde is standard build. Attack, Electro, Crit. For her mask, it's going to be crit damage most of the time because you have so much built-in crit rate with good substats. For the timepiece, most of the time it's going to be attack percent, even in aggravate comps, and this is because Clorinde's A1 passive is very important and caps out at only when she reaches 3000 total attack to provide her with 1800. Exceptions where Elemental Mastery is equivalent or maybe even slightly better than attack main stat is if you're using the Lo-Fi weapon, which is Alhaitham's signature, or Finale of the Deep R5, and you're in a quicken-oriented comp. So Lo-Fi is because the weapon passive converts EM to additional damage. Finale of the Deep because the weapon itself provides an insane attack steroid between like 600 to 1000, and a quicken-oriented comp to actually use the EM bonus if you're using Finale of the Deep. Otherwise, attack percent is still better because it's still hard to reach 3000 total attack. If you plan to run Quicken Clorinde, temporarily using an EM time beast is totally fine while you continue to farm. Recommended stats. So Clorinde's base investment should be level 90 out of 90 for aggravates and her crit rate ascension stat. Talent investment, I recommend 187. This is for maximum E damage and a level 7 burst for 102% bond of life generation. With her signature sword, Absolution, this is roughly what you can expect from her stats. Around 2000 attack, with Thundering Fury on average being lower than Harmonic Whimsy because 2-piece Harmonic grants 18% attack that Thundering Fury doesn't have. HP should sit comfortably at about 18,000 with just base investment, and at least 60% crit rate, but no higher than 80% because A4 passive grants 20% and isn't shown here. Crit damage should easily push 200%, and energy recharge will be anything above 100%. Double Electro provides a pretty healthy amount of energy, and at my current investment of 136% from substats, I'm almost guaranteed to burst every rotation. But this is not necessary, so view energy recharge as an extra stat to focus on after crit rate crit damage. With a 4-star sword like Black Sword, you can expect these differences in stats. Lower attack to 1.6 to 1.8k, and for crit rate and crit damage, it's about the same. Personally, I'm overcapped on crit rate because my current artifacts are optimized around her signature that grants crit damage. But for you, try to hit 75 to 80% crit rate with Black Sword to have 100% effective. With this, you should hover between 200 to 225% crit damage. Team comps. So Clorinde's gameplay and her being Electro makes her possible team variations pretty big. If you don't care about the mathematically strongest possible team for her, she's basically an on-field Electro driver with no reliance on her burst. And this makes her extremely versatile and fun to play. Let's first lay out her generalized team comps so you guys can see what I mean. We have Quicken plus Flex, which is 2 Electro, 1 Dendro, and Flex Slot, which is Anemo Zhongli. Focus on maximized Electro aggravate damage. Then we have Quick Bloom, which trades that Flex Slot for 1 Hydro. It's a different distribution of damage there. Then we have Hyper Bloom, which drops the 2nd Electro for a Flex Slot from the Quick Bloom. And then we have Hyper Carry variations, which include units like Bennett, Kazuha, Farina, Sara, and even possibly Fischl, anything that really could buff Clorinde's damage. Then we have something like Overload Chevreuse, which is Pyro Electro, and then On-Field Driver Taser comp, which is the old school Electro Charge comp. This opens up 6 team archetypes, which even within these 6, there's still a bunch of possible variations you can interchange with. I'm going to hone in on the setups that favor Clorinde's personal kit over the team comp itself. This will be Quicken plus Flex, Quick Bloom, Hyper Carry, and Overload Chevreuse. So Hyper Bloom doesn't favor Clorinde's build because you really just need an Electro unit with shit tons of EM, so like 900 plus. This is not specifically how Clorinde wants to function. Then we have Taser. It's just old school Electro Charge, and Dendro now exists, so why not use it? So, the most popular compositions are going to be Quicken / Quick Bloom comps. These will utilize her favorite sub DPS and generally god tier aggravate sub DPS, which is Fischl. Fischl's A4 passive is broken for Quicken setups, and now Clorinde is here with super fast Electro application for abundant Quicken procs. Add in Nahida as the Dendro unit, and you've got the core setup for this team comp. The last slot for Quicken is a Flex, which can be Zhongli for the shield and minus resistance, or Anemo for Beardus Inventor Shred on Electro, and for Quick Bloom, you'll just add a Hydra unit. These teams generally don't need to rely on healing since Clorinde is the only on-field character here and she has self-sustain. If you prefer more survivability though, this team archetype is very flexible and can interchange each piece with a healer. Of course, your resulting team will be weaker, but that's expected. So the 2nd Electro could instead be Cookie, the Dendro unit could be Yao Yao or Baiju, and then the Flex slot could be someone like Jean or Sayu, or C6 Zhongli if you have C6. So this will mean a sacrifice of Fischl, Nahida, or your Anemo grouper from Kazuha Sucrose, which all contribute to significant damage for the team. In my opinion, the most difficult swap in this is Fischl for a healer, because Fischl's damage output in this team is so strong, it's almost equivalent to Clorinde herself. For team rotation setup, general recommendation is longest duration to shortest, Nahida E setup, and then Fischl Oz or ult, and then Clorinde's on-field rotation. Your Flex unit will join this setup chain depending on their duration. So Hydro setups will be around Nahida setup, Zhongli shield whenever necessary, but it's super long so you can put it at first, or Anemo swirl before Clorinde goes. Now on to Overload Chevreuse. So with this team archetype, it's identical to what you'd experience with Raiden Chevreuse, and it's pretty flexible for the possible Power Electro units. Chevreuse herself and Clorinde are of course unchangeable, but for the 2nd Electro, we can have something like Fischl, Sara, or Beto, and then the 2nd Pyro can be Shaoling, Bennett, or even Toma. This Chevreuse lineup with Clorinde is not reliant on a healer, which opens up more offensive options if you want. Since all of these possible second choices are off-field, you shouldn't encounter too many survivability problems with Clorinde, taking most of the on-field time. In these team setups, you'll have to act quick because Fischl is the only way you can lead for Chevreuse to actually activate the Overload passive, meaning that with Fischl leading the setup, Oz won't stay for too long during Clorinde's on-field time. It's possible to consider using Clorinde's burst to lead, but that may be a general loss of DPS. This is an unfortunate downside of this comp, but it'll still deal impressive damage with proper investment. And finally, Hyper Carry. This team comp is focused on Clorinde's personal damage amplification. So standard boosters like Bennett, Kazuha, Furina, Sara, maybe even Fischl if you want, are the most viable here. If you are using Kazuha to swirl, but you have no other Electro units, you are going to be forced to burst for the initial Electro application so that Kazuha can swirl for Clorinde's E. High Constellation Clorindes probably don't want to do this though, because C4 boosts burst damage quite significantly. So adding a second Electro unit may just be necessary no matter what you want to run with her. And that covers everything you really need to know about Clorinde. Overall, I think she's an exceptionally stylish, lightning fast Electro DPS with lots of fun options for you to try out. Whether you're aiming for meta damage with her, or you just want to have fun with her design, I think everyone will enjoy her pistol form and sword lunges. If I missed anything about her or new things are discovered, let me know in the comments and I'll compile them in the pinned comment. As always, thank you guys for watching, good luck pulling Clorinde, and we'll see you next time. Take care.